I'm Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, January 2nd. What a difference a week makes. The Jetstream is forecast to consolidate, push across the Pacific, form a trough, and actually produce a gale or two of interest and maybe some surf. We need it, and we'll take it. Let's get into it now.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, real data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
Looking at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean, we see a gale developing the northern Gulf, generating 29 to 30 foot seas aimed well at the U.S. West Coast, and possibly some swell resulting from that. And also an area of disturbed weather trying to get organized here on the dateline as the Jetstream tries to wake up in the West Pacific. As usual, we'll start by looking at Jetstream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales when they form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a dip in the jet, just like right there. And what that helps do is create a counterclockwise flow aloft and down at the ocean's surface. That's the hallmark of low pressure. And low pressure, if it's deep enough, generates winds. Winds, if they're strong enough, generate seas. Seas, if they're high enough, as they radiate away from the fetch area, turn into swell. And of course, swell, when it hits your beach, turns into surf. All right, so we have a consolidated jet with winds almost 180 knots pushing off Japan, making it to the dateline, and then the Jetstream split. Southern branch of the jet diving south, northern branch up into the Bering Sea. I mean, this has been the pattern for weeks now, but we got more energy pushing into the jet being fed by the active phase of the MJO, and we think, if the models are right, that this is the beginning of a new pattern for us. We're hoping. Anyway, the jet pushes up into the Bering Sea, and then you notice it falls south over the northern Gulf of Alaska, creating another trough being fed by about 160 knot winds, and that is creating a gale there, and that is supporting storm formation. So that's good news. And then the jet pushing into northern California and Oregon, probably creating some weather there. Let's put this in motion. As we get into Monday, more of the same. Trough continues pushing into northern California, maybe down to Tahoe, something like that, maybe weather in that area. But notice the split point here. We're going to go back and look at this. Here's where the split point is in the jet Sunday night. As we get into Monday night, it's on the move to the east, and this area up here, the cutoff part that's been up in the Bering Sea, starts getting like completely locked out of the picture. Winds build to, what is that, 210 knots, pushing off Japan. Good flow, consolidated jet moving the whole way to a point north of Hawaii. There's the split point, and even a little bit past that, a broader trough tries to get organized here over the the entire North Pacific, really, as we get into Wednesday. More of the same. You see one sort of trough digging out here on Thursday, another one in the northern Gulf also on Thursday. They continue off to the east. You get the sense the jet wants to split a little bit here as we get into Friday, but still, I mean, we've got at least coverage over to a point, well, there's Hawaii, north of Hawaii, so not too bad. New trough building as we get into Friday, still being fed by 190 knot winds. Same deal on Saturday. Look at this. Now the split point moves even past Hawaii, approaching California 150 hours out. So we get into Sunday and Monday, even maybe a little bit more. The storm door knocking on the California, just barely off California. Interesting pattern. This is typically what you'd want to see this time of year, and it's happening for the first time the entire winter. So at least there's good news in the forecast if you believe the models. Next up, let's go take a look down at the surface. Surface level pressure, surface level winds. As expected, a gale, a 1084 millibar low in the Gulf of Alaska, generating 35 to 40 knot winds, aimed well at the U.S. West Coast. That's generating seas that we saw before, and possibly producing swell. Also, some sort of a low trying to organize here on the dateline, being fed by the building jet. And as we get into Monday, there we go, 35, 40 knot fetch aimed well at Hawaii, an additional 30, 35 knot winds aimed at California. So we get into Tuesday, the low in the northern Gulf fades out, but then you get this broad sort of trying to organize area of low pressure with multiple 30 to 35, maybe 40 knot fetch aimed towards the islands, still trying to get its act together. But by Wednesday, you have this broader contiguous fetch of 30 to 35 knot winds aimed well at the islands, building into the 40 to 45 knot range as we get into Thursday. That looks almost like a pretty typical winter type, not a storm, but a gale, we'll say. Pushing over the date line, north of Hawaii as we get into Friday. Lots of fetch, likely swell for the islands, just eyeballing it, not even, doing any detailed analysis. Saturday, same sort of thing. Broad, low pressure gale, almost filling the entire northern Pacific. I gotta say, it's really nice to have something to talk about, and this is exactly what we want, a belated Christmas present, but we'll take it. Looking good. Sunday, more of the same. It continues even into Monday, so a slow-moving, lumbering system pushing across the Pacific. Let's go see the effect of those winds on the ocean surface. Right, significant wave height model. We're going back in time to Wednesday night. What was that? Maybe 4 or 5 days ago. Little low developed up here in the northern dateline region. Didn't really do much, but what it did do is set up enough of a circulation that as the remnants of it pushed into the Gulf of Alaska on Saturday night, just a day ago, created some fetch. 28-foot seas, 29-foot seas, almost 30 feet. 30.4 feet to be exact, over a pixel or two right there. We'll say effectively 29 feet. Whoops. All right, and now let's move forward in time. And here we are, 18Z Sunday. This model just posted. There we go. Still there's our 30-foot seas. Also notice developing fetch 28-foot seas here as we get later this evening, approaching the dateline aimed at Hawaii. So possible swell for both California and Hawaii. As we get into Monday, the system off California fades, 21-foot seas, but still 26-foot seas on the dateline targeting Hawaii, building to 28 feet on Tuesday morning, and then sort of fading out. But we know there's broad low pressure trying to organize here in the we'll call it the western dateline region sort of thing. And as we get into Thursday, well, you can see it for yourself. 32-foot seas there, aimed well at Hawaii. 33-foot seas Thursday night into Friday, 28 to 29 to 30-foot seas, pushing over the dateline. North of Hawaii on Saturday with 26-foot seas. Broad area, even as we're into midday Sunday. Regeneration potentially 32-foot seas, something like that, and continuing on. So the deal is the models, they look great. It's been on the models for quite some time, but the models are unstable, especially on the details here. So don't believe a model a week out. You've heard me say this a bunch. But the general pattern, if you don't get caught up in the details, looks favorable for swell production for both Hawaii and California. Looking at winds right now, you can see a front low pressure system filling the Gulf. Front pushing, it's already pushing into Cape Mendocino. South winds starting to build along the we'll say North California coast. More or less trade, sort of a southeast fetch going into the Hawaiian Islands. So we get into Monday, the front tries to sag south. The real question is how south is it going to go relative to California? And the answer is probably not too far. Lighter trades for Hawaii, still that sort of southeast, southerly type flow. So we get into Tuesday, the front completely dissipates, a rather light wind flow along the California coast. That should be about as swell starts hitting in Northern California, so maybe not too bad. The real issue is how much southerly lump will there be left in the water from the day's previous front. Guess we'll see. Light south flow for Hawaiian Islands as we get into Wednesday. Northerly flow, high pressure starts building, certainly along central California, maybe up into Northern California. Light winds for the Hawaiian Islands. Thursday, same sort of deal, a generally light pressure pattern, all the weather confined to the Pacific Northwest. Friday, new little potential local low developing off of Cape Mendocino. We'll see what that does, how bad that's going to junk things up. Light wind flow for Hawaii. Saturday, the low tries to develop, pushing into California. Not impressive, but you can see the impending wall of doom coming out of the west relative to Hawaii, or that's a good thing too, depending on how you look at it. Coming out of the west, getting very close to Hawaii, not quite there for California. As we're into Saturday and Sunday, massive amounts of fetch off the coast. Hawaiian Islands getting some north winds here as we're into, let's see, that's actually, yeah, it's west winds. I'm actually going back here, just looking at Hawaii. Yeah, it looks like frontal passage or some sort of front coming through the islands on Saturday and then Sunday. And we get ourselves out into late Sunday. You see south winds building along the California coast, at least for Northern California. And you just get the sense that the front and this jet wants to push in. The real question is, will it push in? How far will the consolidated jet make it to the east? Way too early to know. Don't believe a model 180 hours out, but at least it's a step in the right direction for surf. And we haven't had any real surf to talk about in a long time. The expectation is not real surf, like big waves out of this, but at least something with some period and rideable and, just better than wind swell. So things looking up for the new year. Quick look at precipitation. Low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska, falling south. Where are we? Here's California, San Francisco right there. Tahoe right about there. You see maybe just all the labels sort of obscured here. We got another chart. You see rain down to maybe San Francisco, maybe some snow for Tahoe. Pretty light on Monday night and Tuesday. That fades out. Rain continues for most of Northern California Tuesday. Then Wednesday, everything sort of clears out. High pressure sets up. But then, as we get into Friday, the next low pressure sets up. Snow developing by Friday night for the Tahoe region, pushing south down to probably about Mammoth later in the evening, or at least Yosemite, Mammoth, something like that. Then clearing out some on Saturday, and Sunday, you're good to go. Bluebird conditions. And then the next wall, a totally different sort of setup. Rather than these backdoor troughs falling down the coast, dragging cold air with them, this, if it makes its way into the U.S. West Coast, will be warmer temperatures, much more precipitation, but also likely much higher snow levels. Just a quick look here at the snow setup. This is a snow model for Monday. You can see precip and the freezing precip making it into Tahoe about Monday night. Just barely down to maybe Kirkwood or something like that on Tuesday morning, and then dissipating later on Tuesday, and then things high and dry over California until we get into Friday, the next system building off the coast, supposedly a little bit more robust, but again, the models have been highly flaky to say the least. But decent snow continuing into, we'll say, Saturday and then fading out. And we'll run this thing out after that, but I don't think there's a whole lot more behind that. There we go. Yeah, 240 hours. So two potential snow-producing systems for the Sierra in the next week. So just to give you a sense of how flaky the models have been. So this first little system here, this is the Monday night. We're talking, maybe 4 inches of snow, something like that. But then supposedly 25 inches or another, let's say 20 inches on top of that for the Friday, Saturday time frame. This is the 18Z run of the model. The 12Z run had virtually nothing here. Nothing at all. So you go from 2 feet accumulation, from 4 inches of accumulation with the 12Z run to 2 feet plus with the 18Z run. So certainly not a horse that I would bet on. Anyway, this is for Olympic Valley. Freezing levels here. Pretty low right now. Continuing. Let's see. These charts are in sync, so you can just sort of scroll right down there. So snow level about 5,000 feet for the first dump on what is that, Monday night, something like that. Temperatures going way up to almost freezing level, almost up to 12,000 feet, and then crashing as we get into Friday down to about 5,000 feet, something like that. This is the base at Squaw. This is the summit at 9,000 feet. Then you see after that just sort of this steady freeze level about 7,000 feet, something like that. Wind-wise, a pretty good amount of wind here for the Monday precip event. These forecasts typically are a little bit low, we've found out. This says 80, but we got some sensors up there at the top of Siberia at Squaw, and 100 miles an hour is probably more likely. Gust to 100 from this one, and then maybe he'd stack another 20 knots on top of his 80 knots for the other one. So the point being, don't expect the upper mountain to be open in, bombing sort of conditions. It's probably going to be really wind packed, blown, that sort of thing. But we have a good base. Oh yeah, speaking of which, so the last big dump we had, the week-long dump that occurred over Christmas, the models were projecting anywhere from 105 to 145 inches of accumulation at the top of Squaw based on which run and where it was. The actual number was 126 inches, which falls right smack in the middle of the range of the models. The point being, any one run of the model, there's a lot of variation between the runs, but if you're looking at multiple runs day after day, you sort of pick an average somewhere in the middle. At least for right now, that appears to be working pretty well once the models have a good handle on things. So this storm actually delivered what it was supposed to. We got 10 feet of snow up there. Can't really complain about that at all. A quick look at Kirkwood, a little bit further south. They only get an inch out of the first system. Remember, that system squeaking down from the north, hardly making it to the South Lake, and that's it. Second batch, second pulse, making it further down the Sierra, maybe 21, 22 inches. Snow levels, about the same, but Kirkwood's higher, so they can tolerate it. And then Mammoth, well, even further south, so virtually nothing from the first pulse. Second pulse, again, not a whole lot from that either, maybe 4 inches, something like that. Have to keep watching the models to see. Maybe if we get lucky, that low will push further south. But the deal is with these, what do they call it? Backdoor trough, backdoor fronts pushing from the north-south. Everything either gets wrung out or the storm pretty much fades the further south it goes versus the ones that are coming out of the west, like what we think might start happening 2 weeks from now, something like that, there is a lot more moisture. It's coming right out of the west. It hits the entire Sierra from top to bottom, right face on, and so everyone shares in the glory of the precip as long as the temperatures are cold enough. All right, let's go take a look. Long term, what's going on with the Madden Julian Oscillation? Yes, we have one. And El Nino or La Nina. As usual, we start by looking at winds on the equator. We're looking for signs of the active phase of the MJO. The MJO is this periodic weather oscillation. The active phase and an inactive phase. 2 phases. Whoops, get centered. There we go. One side, the active phase on one side of the planet, the inactive phase on the other side. They travel west to east around the equator. The active phase is the one we're interested in. It is effectively a low pressure system. It travels west to east on the equator. When it pushes over the Pacific, starting in the West Pacific, it can dampen trade winds, if not out and out reverse them. That in turn imparts energy or sends energy up into the jet stream, feeds the jet stream, and then that in turn feeds storm production. We see the jet stream consolidating, pushing across the Pacific. That is a clear sign of the active phase of the MJO building over the West Pacific, something we want to have. The flip side of this is the inactive phase. When it shows up and makes its way across the Pacific, it's high pressure. It steals energy from the jet stream. The jet stream then typically splits, which is where we've been for, seems like months now. That, of course, was not all completely to blame on the MJO. A lot of it is to blame on La Nina. La Nina is like a long-running inactive phase of the MJO. El Nino is like a long-running active phase of the MJO. All right, so we have data from the TAO buoy array, series of buoys strung across the equator used for monitoring El Nino. This is the East Pacific here. This is the West Pacific here. Here's the equator. We're just looking at the arrows. The colors are water temperatures. We're not interested in that at the moment. Winds out of the east, pretty strong in the East Pacific, pretty strong over the Central Pacific, but then you get here in the West Pacific, and they're kind of aimless and not really sure where they're going. perhaps a sign of the active phase of the MJO. But it's not actual wind speeds, it's the anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. You see, yeah, these arrows are still pointing out of the east, suggesting these winds up here are a bit stronger than normal for this time of year. But then you get to the Central Pacific and go, this looks pretty normal. You get to the West Pacific, you almost get a hint of westerly anomalies. And that is the first time we have seen this since the summertime, the first time this entire winter. So I think it's pretty safe to say this is the first semi-legitimate active phase of the MJO we've had the entire winter. Now you tie that to your understanding of, well, how much surf have we had? And you go, well, not a whole lot. And whatever we have had has been falling down out of the north instead of pushing out of the west. And then you realize, well, La Nina has been in control, firm control, and this active phase of the MJO that it appears is happening just from looking at this one chart is the first potential active phase we've had all winter. Next up, what's the forecast for the next week? This is just east or west component of the wind. Again, east. The east anomalies are the inactive phase of the MJO. The west anomalies are the active phase of the MJO. So what is this chart? It's the whole planet on one chart. The blues are easterly anomalies. The reds are westerly anomalies. We don't care about north winds or south winds. It's just, is it blowing more out of the west or more out of the east? All right, how do you read this? Dateline, 180 degrees, runs right up the middle. Pacific Ocean starts about 125 west, so roughly right along there. And it goes to, well, about 80 west, somewhere right there. You can actually see a seam in the image. But it's not the entire Pacific that we're interested in, only the West Pacific, because that's where the active phase does its magic. When it's over the West Pacific, that's where it imparts energy to the jet stream. That's where it changes the trade winds. That's where it also can help create Kelvin waves. That is, take warm water in the West Pacific and push it to the east. If you get successive Kelvin waves, that can help usher in El Nino. All right, so this is past performance here. We did have a bit of westerly anomalies back in early December. They kind of faded out, and then they've been trying to gather themselves ever since. We have a pretty good pocket, the furthest pocket west of westerly anomalies we've seen all winter on the dateline, and for the next week, forecast to be some sort of mild form of westerly anomalies through the end of the week. Easterly anomalies from the dateline east, but doesn't really matter. It's this area from 170 west, right here. You draw a box in your mind to the West Pacific. Kelvin wave generation area. That's also the area that's responsible for feeding energy to the jet stream. So the forecast looking pretty positive. Let's go further out. Let's go out 2 weeks. We're looking at outgoing long wave radiation 15-day forecast. Okay, fancy words for cloud cover, right? We said the active phase of the MJO is like a low pressure system. Low pressure systems have clouds associated with them. The inactive phase, high pressure systems, do not have clouds with them. So looking at this, the oranges are a lot of basically sunlight reflectivity off the ocean surface. Positive values. Inactive phase of the MJO. Active phase right here, negative anomalies. Lots of cloud cover, sunlight can't reflect off the ocean surface. All right, 4-day charts, 5 days each chart. South America there, Central America, Hawaii, New Guinea, New Zealand, Philippines. Kelvin wave, dateline right there, 180 right there. Equator, EQ right there. The West Pacific Kelvin wave generation area is right here, right in that area right there. The blue, cloud cover, meaning the active phase of the MJO. And this is per the statistic model. You go 5 days from now, pretty much the same thing. The statistic model suggests the active phase moving almost out of the Kelvin wave generation area 10 days from now and gone with the inactive phase taking over 15 days from now. So we got about a 2-week sweet spot, not even quite that according to this model. The dynamic model now, and I'll keep the statistic model up here as a reference point. Active phase, doing the same thing, but look at this. Retrograding back over the West Pacific, still solid on the dateline 2 weeks from now, with the inactive phase locked in the Indian Ocean. This is exactly what we want to see, and we hope that the dynamic model is the way this plays out and not what the statistic model does. We think the dynamic model's actually been doing better lately than the statistic model, so we're going to go with it, saying maybe at least 2 weeks of the active phase. That'll give plenty of time for that jet stream to hopefully push into California or come very close to it and therefore feed storm development. Next up, phase diagrams. Same two models, statistic model, dynamic model. The heavy dot is where the active phase of the MJO is now. So the MJO moves west-east from the Indian Ocean over the Maritime Continent, over the West Pacific to the East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. So the active phase is, we'll say according to this, the leading edge of it in the East Pacific already. These are the three different member forecasts. The statistical model, and the further the dot is away from the circle, the stronger it is. So we'll say a modest strength active phase of the MJO in the East Pacific, forecast to move into over Africa, almost the Indian Ocean, 2 weeks from now, according to the statistic model. But look at the dynamic model. It just has the active MJO holding at about modest to moderate strength, toggling around somewhere between the West Pacific and the East Pacific for the next 2 weeks. Again, we'll take it. That is exactly what we want to see, though I'd prefer it to be like up here, way much stronger. But given where we're at this winter, we'll take it. The upper level model, propensity for precipitation. Green's favorable for precipitation, orange is not favorable for precipitation. So consider the greens the active phase, the oranges the inactive phase. 8 panels here, 5 days per panel. Each panel, there's South America, Central America, Hawaii, just barely there, New Guinea there, equator right there, dateline roughly there, Kelvin wave generation area right there, active phase of the MJO, the greens, favorable for precip, in the West Pacific in the Kelvin wave generation area today. Also note this is the statistic model, and the statistic model from what we saw the last panel is showing the active phase moving east quicker than the dynamic model. In fact, pushing into Central America on January 22nd with the inactive phase right behind it. But notice this, strong inactive phase in the Indian Ocean, but it really just gets completely shredded coming across the Kelvin wave generation area. And it too makes its way across the Pacific towards the end of the model run there. That'd be February 11th. And then the active phase behind that redeveloping in the West Pacific, about the early part of February, and then making its trip across. The 1 month CFS model, looking really quite good. Same deal, whole planet on one chart. The oranges and reds are westerly anomalies. The blues are easterly anomalies. The dotted contour is the inactive phase. The solid contour is the active phase of the MJO. So here's where we are today, January 1st, 1 day behind. You can see the active phase started in somewhere in November over in the very far West Pacific. It's been slowly trying to make its way across the Pacific. Looks like we're in the last big push of it here with moderate to strong westerly anomalies from now through the next 8 to 9 days, something like that, and then fading a little bit, pushing its way across the Pacific into the second week in January, and then pretty much fading out. The dotted contour, the inactive phase of the MJO, showing up behind that, making it into the Pacific in the Kelvin wave generation area about the 20th of January and holding through the end of the month. So if there was a sweet spot for storm production in terms of surf, that is right now for the next 2 weeks or so. So just put that on your calendar, consider that. Make what accommodations you need to make sure you get whatever surf there is that's going to come out of all this. And then if a 1 month model isn't enough, certainly a 3 month model is even better, if you believe it. All right, so past performance down the bottom, the forecast is at the top. Same sort of deal. Whole planet on one chart. Date line runs right up the middle there, 180 degrees. Kelvin wave generation area starts about here. Sorry, I'm trying to look around the microphone. Right about there. And then the east side of it's about there. So our box is somewhere right around in here. You can see westerly anomalies right there. associated with our current active phase of the MJO, that starts fading out as we get into about mid-January. Then we have our easterly anomaly pattern. That's supposed to go into late February, but westerly anomalies again start pushing into the Kelvin wave generation area, maybe about mid-February. So our window here is till about, we'll say mid-January, and then from mid-January to mid-February, good time to go work, do whatever you got to do. And then after that, things supposedly wake up yet again. Let's overlay the MJO. The solid contour is the active phase of the MJO. So according to this, the active phase is almost out of the Kelvin wave generation area today, but westerly anomalies are to hang on even after it's gone, even as the inactive phase tries to set up. And that's exactly what we want to see. That suggests that maybe and we'll talk about this in a minute, the high pressure bias in the Pacific is starting to lose some of its strength. Anyway, pretty good burst of easterly anomalies forecast around the first week of February. So probably not great for storm production there. But then a pretty I don't know if I want to say robust, but a solid active phase of the MJO, again setting up about let's say the beginning of the second week in February, continuing the whole way through the end of March. That's a significant change, considering that we have not had even one legitimate, you see this here, active phase of the MJ. It says there was one in October, but I don't recall it doing a whole lot. I think this and this are going to be a lot more successful at swell production than the last active phase of the MJO. Now we're going to overlay the low-pass filter. And this is where things get real interesting. The dotted contour is a high-pressure bias. Consider it La Nina, the La Nina signal, right smack over the date line, or at least it's been there up until about now. And you see it start shifting off to the east, and by the end of January, it's out of the Kelvin wave generation area. And this solid contour is the low pressure bias moving from the Indian Ocean into the Pacific, almost filling the Kelvin wave generation area at the end of March. So you'd go, oh, this is great. This would be the perfect setup if winter was starting here, but instead winter's all but done by the end of March. And, a little bit late, but this is kind of how it works. When you go from that change of phase from La Nina to El Nino or El Nino to La Nina, it typically happens somewhere. If it's really strong, it'll happen in late January, early February. If it's really weak, it'll happen in June or July. This maybe is a bit optimistic. I don't think we're heading towards any sort of El Nino, but at least maybe we'll be heading back to a normal pattern as we get to the start of spring, which would be good because the hope is get this high pressure bias out of here as we get into spring. Still, it's going to be off California, and you get that dreaded just north wind and wind swell, and temperatures just drop off miserably, and it's just, that's probably going to happen since we're in La Nina now. But I'm hoping at least the low pressure bias sort of takes some of the edge out of that, and it's not as brutally cold and windy as it can be. And just a quick look before we move on from the MJO thing, the strength of the MJO. So this chart does not depict anything in terms of position of the MJO, though one can assume most of it is in the West Pacific and the maritime continent. But since June or April of last year, 2021, very, very weak MJO signal, typically associated with La Nina. And last year, the exact same thing, or 2020, same deal, as compared to 2015 when we were in a major El Nino. You see the spikes running off the top of the chart. And even in 2018, you got a sense of a little bit of activity, but you can see for 2 years, for the most part, things have been very quiet. We're hoping that we're getting ready to turn the corner away from that. Next up, subsurface temperatures, ocean surface temperatures. West Pacific here, East Pacific here. This is just on the equator. And you go down 100, 200, 300 meters. That's, 900 feet roughly. Okay? And These are the anchor lines on this data from the TAA buoy array. These are the anchor lines on those buoys. The X's are the sensors on those anchor lines. You notice there's a big missing block of data right here, but otherwise coverage is reasonably good. The good note here, this is the 29 degrees centigrade isotherm. For a year, it's been completely missing from the chart. It's all of a sudden starting to creep off to the west a little bit. And not just like it was barely like over here a month ago, and now it's almost to, we'll say 173 east. That's a good sign. The 28 degree isotherm, it's been locked at 180. It's trying to creep off to the east a little. We're not suggesting a Kelvin wave or anything, but just that there's a bolus of warm water building here and trying to push off to the east a little bit. Maybe the trade winds are backing off, allowing it a little bit of motion. That would be a sign of the demise of La Nina as well. The 24 degree isotherm, it's been hovering somewhere around 125 west, so it's about where it has been. No change. But these are actual temperatures. It's the anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. And you can clearly see in this image the dynamic that's going on. Cold water, blue, much colder than normal, 5 degrees centigrade below normal in the East Pacific, warmer, much warmer than normal, 4+ degrees in the West Pacific. The interesting part, let's see if we can get the leading edge of this is somewhere right around here, which is about 155 west. So, is that right? Yeah, 155. And there's a sense that this warm water is making some eastward headway. We're not saying a Kelvin wave, but just volume of warm water building, just sort of pushing the edge slightly more. At some point, it's going to get released and make its way across the Pacific. We don't think that's happening yet. It's going to take a strong active phase of the MJO to do that, or the demise of La Nina to enable that to happen. So here's some other data. Same basic sensors, some other data, but gives you the same picture. What do we got here? How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, almost 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 4, almost 5 degrees there, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the high end of the warm side on this side of the chart, the high end of the cold side on this side of the chart, a brick wall between them. But again, this dividing line was at 160 or almost 165 west a week and a half ago, something like that. It's making some headway. Again, we still don't think it's a Kelvin wave, but typically what you'd see is this starting to slowly move its way across the Pacific, and it would just wipe out all that cold water. Don't think that's happening yet, but things looking better. Sea level anomalies, all right? So this is not temperatures, the height of the ocean surface. We've talked about this before. Equator here, dateline here, Central, Chile there, Peru, Central America, Hawaii there, New Guinea there, Kelvin wave generation area over in here. What we've been watching is, so this is from the Jason 3 satellite, strip out the waves, strip out the wind waves, strip out the tides. And we're just, is the sphere of the ocean where it should be, or is it lower than normal or higher than normal? This says 15 centimeters below normal. So this is, and generally, so cold water at depth contracts. It'll create a bump, a divot on the ocean surface. Warm water expands. It'll create a bump on the ocean surface. So we see positive anomalies here, 10, 15 centimeters. This is where all your warm water is. Negative anomalies here. This is where all your cold water is. This is better than it was a month ago when we had minus 20 and minus 25 centimeter anomalies. But this minus 15 centimeter pocket here, it was not here a week or two ago. It's building some, suggesting maybe another pulse of La Nina trying to get itself in play. Now, the other thing is the warm water was all confined to the west side of the dateline. It is creeping to the east some. So, again, just more confirmation of what we were seeing in the other charts. And this one puts the whole picture together really nicely. So back in time, January 2021, cold water in the East Pacific, warm water in the West Pacific. Last summer, had a couple Kelvin waves made it across the Pacific. We go, maybe La Nina's dead. No, we got to July. It woke up, just nuking east anomalies. Temperatures dropped off. Big bolus of cold water here about mid-October. It faded out, and we go, maybe it's over, but then you see this new little pocket here starting to build in. But still, notice the warmer the normal waters, making it to 160. We haven't seen that since we've seen Kelvin waves back this past summer. So, again, maybe the worst of La Nina, at least down in the ocean, is over. And then again, with the active phase of the MJO showing up and another one forecast, that sort of, and the moving of the low pressure bias into the Pacific, that all sort of suggests that maybe the worst of La Nina is gone as well. All that said, let's look at sea surface temperatures, not subsurface, surface temperatures. You see Chile, Peru, Central America, Hawaii, the blue, colder than normal temperatures, filling the east equatorial Pacific. Clear signs of La Nina. Now we drive into the details. This area right here, the coldest of it, this is much smaller in coverage than it was even a couple of days ago or a week or 2 weeks ago. You also get the sense that warm anomalies are trying to build out here. They weren't, I mean, this was all solid blue out here a week ago, so that's sort of fading. There was also now pockets of warming right along Peru, not much, but a little bit here to Ecuador, just suggesting La Nina again. The cold waters associated with it aren't as deep. It doesn't have as much magnitude. It's kind of losing its mojo. Next up, sea surface temperature trend for the past 7 days. You see warming along Chile and Peru right here, and that equates well with this actual warming temperatures along the coast there. Now we see some cooling from the Galapagos out here to a point south of California, but not particularly strong enough, but no warming either. And otherwise just sort of a mixed pattern of nothing. This is probably the biggest trend of anything, and it's not even in the official El Nino monitoring region, but we'll keep our eyes on it. And the backed off view, again, big cold triangle from Chile up to Ecuador out to the date line. This did go over to like 165 east at one point. You see it starting to contract a little. Then warming holding here, but the cold, the depth and the strength of the coolness not looking as strong as it was. Actual temperatures, Nino 1.2 region. This is the area just right on the equator there by Ecuador, the Galapagos. That temperatures still, well, they dropped off, they bottomed out. They're falling now down to 1.821 degrees, so 1 3/4 and a little bit more degrees below normal. Definitely cold, but it doesn't appear to be getting any colder. It's just noodling around here, probably bottomed out. The Nino 3.4 index, well, the coldest we had was about 1.05 degrees back in late October. Now we're at 1.088 or 88 thousandths of 1 88 thousandths of a degree below normal. So cool, not as cool as last year, but still cool. Half a degree below normal for 5 consecutive months is considered La Nina. We're clearly in La Nina territory, but we're not in major La Nina territory. You'd need to be down like 1.5 or 2 degrees, so not so bad, but not great. All right, so we have cold water at depth in the ocean. We have stronger than normal trades, but we have the active phase of the MJO trying to make headway in the West Pacific. What does the atmosphere, so typically you have cold water, you get high pressure building on top of that, and high pressure, of course, does nothing for generating surf, at least not significant surf other than wind swell. So what does the atmosphere think is going on? So we look here, Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Tahiti's in the Pacific, Darwin's in the Indian Ocean. When pressure is lower in the Pacific, i.e. Tahiti, the index goes negative. Hey, minus 2.11 today. And when, oh, look at that, we were up to plus 46 the day at Christmas. And then But looking back, we've been positive like forever, right? But we do know the active phase of the MJO is moving into the Pacific. That should be lowering the pressure over Tahiti and driving the index negative. The 30-day average takes some of the noise out of this. 12.36, still kind of up there. Looking back, yeah, we've been hanging in the 12 range forever. The expectation, since we're only a week or so into the active phase of the MJO, is that this will start falling. How far it falls, we'll need to see a bunch more negative, but we've only got 2 days, maybe 3 days of really dropping numbers here, so a little bit early. This is a 30-day average. It's a lagging indicator. By the time this really starts dropping negative, everyone will know that we're in the active phase. I mean, we already know that. But still, this is a way to measure it and put some numbers around it. 90-day average, the El Nino La Nina indicator. Today, 10.40. What's it been? Unchanged. But that's actually good news, right? So this guy, during last year's La Nina, went up to 19. I don't think we're going to get there. And this guy went up to 15 and a half, something like that. I don't think we're going to get there either, not with the pending active phase of the MJO coming in. And even with an inactive phase after that, I think we're going to sit probably somewhere right here where we are, which again suggests that La Nina is not as strong as last year and maybe done all it's going to do. The downside is it's done a lot. I mean, we've had really no surf this winter at all. Worse, in fact, our index, if you go to the surf forecast page, we rate the potential for the winter on a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being epic and 1 being horrible. Right now, we've rated this winter at a 1.5. Even if we had some decent surf starting now, it'd be pretty hard to make up for the 3 months that have already gone by where we've had virtually nothing. So we'll see. Maybe the weather will prove us wrong, and we'd be happy to have that happen. Here's a 30-day SOI graphed out so you can see where we're at today. What is that, about 13 or something like that? Last winter's peak, we were up at 21 according to this. There's this graph and the data from the previous page are actually from 2 different sources, but you get the general idea here. We had a bit of so we go back to 2020, we were in sort of a weak El Nino. Here was the beginning of our La Nina in 2020. It backed off last spring, and then here it comes building again. The question is it going to get this high? I don't think so. It'll make it to maybe here at best, and then that'll probably be it, which is exactly what we want to see. And then finally, the sea surface temperature forecast for the official El Nino monitoring region, the Nino 3.4 region. That's on the equator, points south of California out to about the date line, 5 degrees north and south of the equator. So here's the solid line is what's actually happened. Here where we are, this is January 15th here, so right at about 1 degree below normal. And according to this, we're as cold as we're going to get. And from here, a slow but steady upward trend to minus 0.3 degrees, moving out of La Nina territory as we get into July, half a degree below normal, remember? So maybe returning to normal this summer. This is the raw data. The PDF corrected version, pretty much the same thing, saying, about 1 degree below normal, going to the same place, maybe 0.3 of a degree below normal. So the thought is, well, maybe as we get into the summer, probably not a great start to summer either, but we're hoping that as we get into next fall, we'll be back to normal. It takes a while, even once water temperatures warm, it's still 3 to 4 months after that before the atmosphere, the jet stream, everything sort of figures out that things have changed. The atmosphere is a big boat. It takes a while to change direction, and when you've been in 2 years of La Nina, there's a lot of momentum towards that sort of pattern. The focus right now is all like the East Atlantic Ocean and the Indian Ocean, and for all that to refocus into the Pacific, it'll take a while. It'll probably be late next fall till we actually get there, but at least all this data suggests we are making moves towards getting in that configuration. So the good news is, Active phase of the MJO building in the West Pacific, feeding the Jetstream. The Jetstream is consolidated and the split point is moving off to the east. The question is, how close will it get to California? Will it, I mean, from a surf perspective, it'd be great if it actually sort of stayed off the coast. You get all the surf, you don't get the weather associated with it. You get a little bubble of high pressure sitting right smack over top of the Golden State, and you have glassy conditions and surf. The downside with that is, again, we have a lot of we've gotten a lot of precipitation, a good snowpack, but it's not enough to make up for years of drought behind that. So still, every drop of precipitation counts. We'll take it any way we can get it, rain or snow, just bring it on. Kind of hoping that the jet does push into Northern California and Central California and bring us more moisture. But the good news is, swell for sure. It looks some degree of rideable surf is going to come with the active phase of the MJ over the next 2 to maybe 3 weeks, something like that. So make some time if you can, get in the water, enjoy the waves while you have them. Then after that, we get mid-January to mid-February, probably in active phase of the MJO, the surf machine shuts off. Maybe we'll end up back where we get into those backdoor troughs falling down the coast again. Sort of hard to guess this far out. But if that happens, well, okay, you get precipitation, snow. I mean, good cold snow, light snow, so that wouldn't be so bad either. Then after that, another active phase of the MJO setting up. Looking out beyond that, it looks like La Nina is on its last legs. I mean, it isn't going to save us for this winter. It won't even save us for this spring. But maybe as we get later into summer and certainly into fall, more of a normal kind of pattern will set up. So, you know, and by the time we get into next winter, hey, we should be back to normal. I don't know that we're moving to El Nino. There's not enough latent heat energy buildup, at least not yet in the West Pacific, to push us over that point. And if it were going to happen, if it was going to be strong, it would happen in like February, March, and no real sign of that. But a return to normalcy looks likely. And that is good news. That is the best Christmas present we could have as of right now. All right, if you enjoyed the video, give us, there we go, a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Comments always welcome. We try to reply to everyone's comment. If you have questions, don't understand something, just write it in there. We'll reply. Everyone will gain from the knowledge. All you have to do is step forward and say, hey, I don't understand something. And there's a lot of data here. I know it's tough. It's tough. It took me years to figure this out, so that's why I figured I'd share it. And you know, questions, welcome. Anyway, that's it for this week. We're going to do it again next week. Same time, same channel. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, get some waves, and Happy New Year, everybody.